My guest today is Alex O'Brien, COO and founding partner of the Cardinal Group. Since its founding, the Cardinal Group has become one of the largest and fastest growing providers of rental housing of all sorts, student, multifamily, BTR, and even affordable with a capital A. However, even with how diverse Cardinal is, I want to talk with Alex about something much more specific, the intersection of the veteran community and multifamily housing. See, Alex is a very proud and deservingly so veteran. Having served as an officer in the Marine Corps, he has translated his military service and skills into a very successful multifamily career and has a very deep heart for helping other veterans do the same. So deep that he serves as the vice chair for Salute Colorado, a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting veterans with the transition from military leaders to business and community leaders. During our conversation, we discussed the transferable traits between military service and multifamily operations and the amazing opportunity and talent pool available in the veteran community that can help multifamily bridge the talent gap we continually face, an interesting solution to a problem the industry continues to struggle with. But before we dive in, just a reminder that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of LeaseLock. The content is intended for general informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice or endorsements. While we strive to ensure the content is as accurate and up-to-date as possible, LeaseLock makes no representations or warranties of any kind, expressed or implied, regarding the accuracy, completeness, or reliability of the information discussed. The content is provided as is, and LeaseLock assumes no responsibility for any errors or omissions. Listeners should consult with qualified professionals before making any decisions based on the content of this podcast. This podcast may include references to third-party sources, which are provided for convenience and informational purposes only. LeaseLock does not endorse or take responsibility for the accuracy or reliability of any third-party content. In no event shall LeaseLock, its affiliates, or any of its employees, officers, or agents be liable for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, or consequential damages arising out of or in conjunction with the use or the reliance of the content of this podcast. Now, with a highly scripted disclaimer out of the way, let's get unscripted with Alex O'Brien. Hey, Alex, I really appreciate you jumping on with me. I know this was kind of a last minute request, but I thought it might be something that is touching, not a nerve with you, I guess a passion point for you. And to kind of dive straight in, we're going to talk about, I think, the way that veterans and multifamily can come together. And it's something that I've had a lot of interest in over the years, and I'll share why as we kind of go through. But normally I don't do this with guests, but your story is so integral to this. Why don't you tell everyone kind of who you are, what you do, and then how your background came into this and why this is an important topic for you?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. And I love the last minute. Like you said, it's a topic near and dear to my heart. So happy to make time. And if it helps one person hire a veteran, then, we did our job. But and so Alex O'Brien, CEO of Cardinal Group based in Denver. I actually did start my career as a Marine Corps officer. I, maybe even to rewind before that, I went to a Catholic high school in Dayton, Ohio. None of my family had ever gone to school. And so this kind of, all of my buddies were going to college. And one day I was trying to, for how much I love Ohio, I was like, I got to put in the rear view. I got to get the hell out of here. My dad was a postal worker. My mom had stayed home to raise me and my three brothers. But no one ever really talked about college because that wasn't our lived experience. And so went down to the Navy recruiting station, signed up, enlisted in the Navy, much to my parents' surprise, and was actually going to be a nuclear sub technician, was kind of a math and physics nerd. And then luckily got a call one day and someone said, have you considered ROTC? And I was like, I don't even know what that is, which I'm sure my recruiter got in trouble for not telling me about it. But anyway, went through the application process, got the scholarship, which was just a huge moment for me and amazing for my family. Obviously, financing college was probably one of the reasons why we never talked about it. But anyway, so went to the Navy, ROTC, and in the first year, you go to a summer training program out in Virginia, and you do ships, SEALs, some aviation stuff, and then the Marines, which a lot of people know is part of the Navy. We always say it's the men's department part of the Navy. But
Y'all just
we
can't help yourselves. You just can't
there,
help.
there's always good rivalry.
That's fair. That's
I was, the Navy Army game was great though. But anyway, so I was talking to a Marine sergeant, and I said, how do you know if you should choose the Navy or the Marine Corps? And he said, when you go to a sporting event and you hear the national anthem, he said, if that gives you chills up your spine, you should be a Marine. If you feel nothing, you should go in the Navy. and so, like a good 18-year-old, I went home, had my scholarship changed over to the Marine Corps, and the rest was history. So graduated in '02, spent the next 5 years in the Marine Corps, and that was the start of my career before multifamily, before real estate. So yeah.
So before we jump into that, so did you come from a family history of military service?
My grandfather had been in the Air Force, and I think like a lot of people of our generation, kind of a sprinkling of it. But I wasn't like my dad had served, my like a Lieutenant Dan story or something
Right.
where, like there was any pressure to serve or anything like that. My grandfather had been on the U.S. Army basketball team. He was a big basketball star back in the day. And so had kind of history of some service, but it wasn't like we were a military family. There wasn't a pressure there. It was really just, opportunity. Plus, I just really kind of felt called to serve, and especially as time went on and I went from, dumb 18-year-old just signing up for, the military to someone who truly understood what it meant to sign, to actually put your name on paper, to volunteer, to serve. And so, I always kind of felt that calling. And then as I progressed through my military career, it became very real to me. So,
yeah, that's interesting because it's one of those things that's, and not to make this about me, but it's one of those things that I've always somewhat regretted is not serving. So my grandfather was in the Navy during World War II. My father was National Guard, was active for a while. My uncle served. Several of my cousins have served in various different ones, but I didn't. And I had the opportunity to, when you get an Eagle Scout, your congressman always kind of reach out to you and say, hey, is this something that's of interest to you? I'd be willing to write the recommendation letter, for you for the academies. And I passed, and at 18, actually 17 then, 17, I hard passed. Like I was like, nope. But it is one of those things that I do look back and honestly, I guess maybe because I do have a little bit of a family history of, what would have been like, what would have been different like. And the idea of that knowing of what it is to serve, where I don't have the intimate knowledge of it, just being tangentially around it, folks. It is something that later in life has been one of those things. Like, I wonder, is that something I should have done or should not? Never go back and change it, obviously, but
yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I think it certainly takes a village attitude. There's a lot of ways to serve, even if you're not in the military. And so I always, I've heard that sentiment a lot, and certainly respect people who share that. And I always say, well, you're serving now, you're shining a light on the veteran community. There's so many ways that we can kind of honor and serve. And it's not just, you had to sign up for one of the branches and go and deploy and all this stuff. And I think that, it's the sentiment of wanting to serve that I think matters more. And there's, I first responders and Teach for America. And there's people serve in so many ways, and hopefully, even in their local communities too. And so I think the military is a great way to serve, and one that I was proud to do. But, I always feel bad because sometimes people are like, it's almost like that regret. It's like, there's nothing to regret. There's still a lot of ways you can make a big impact. So,
I very much appreciate that, and I'll take it. Okay, so let's talk about that transition from military into rental housing, because you guys at Cardinal do pretty much all the rental housing in one way, shape, or form. How did that transition happen for you? Like, what was the impetus?
Yeah, I got lucky. I work with a lot of veterans now and talk about entrepreneurship and careers, and they're always, they'll ask me, well, how do you climb the corporate ladder and how do you get promoted? I'm like, dude, I have no idea. I've never been promoted. I was like,
you start the company yourself.
Yeah, I started it, and then I'm still here. But I had linked up with the co-founders of Cardinal Group in San Diego. I was based out of Camp Pendleton, just north of San Diego, and through connections with Dell and Jason and Eric, got kind of connected to those guys. And I'd studied finance, had a background in finance and accounting, but more than that, I'd kind of given up on this. I don't know, my college degree was going to matter. I mean, I was kind of all in on leadership and organizational behavior and operations, as we call it now.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you know, I think I was just young enough and aggressive enough to want to give entrepreneurship a shot. I really admired Jason and Dell and Eric, just as potential partners and what that would look like. And so, I mean, to say our vision was clear is, it's funny to think about now. But for me, I just kind of knew what I was bringing in terms of hard work and organizational behavior and this kind of get it done attitude, this bias for action. So I think I brought a lot from my military experience, but probably a little bit abnormal of a journey from those that kind of get out of the military and then join a company and then have to navigate the experience gap, the skill gap, and kind of all that. And so that's why I spend a lot of my time helping veterans navigate that. I really had an experience, and I'm doing some podcast work with this guy, Mike Targos, now, who's a leadership coach and really was my leadership coach in the Marine Corps. But, I just watched all these guys that I just admired and had so much respect for. And after 20 years of service, when they would get out of the military, it was just such like a hard transition and hard
Yeah.
to really just match their skill set with the opportunity. And these are people that have led thousands of men and women and then are offered like, a mid-level management job. And I was like, well, they would be like my boss, and so they're like, way above in terms of experience and skill. And so, I, in our industry, especially, I'm pretty focused on that because I want to make sure, our industry recognizes the value of veterans and veterans recognize the skill sets they bring and trying to marry those two together. And so while I didn't experience that, there was a good chance I would have, like,
Yeah.
to look back and act like, Cardinal Group was a surefire thing. It's like startups aren't meant to last. And so, we're 20 years into the journey and feel pretty blessed that it has. But, I could have easily been, 28 years old, fresh off a failed real estate startup, trying to navigate my own, opportunity set with no clue on what the hell to do. And so my heart really goes out to these men and women who are going through that experience, and I want to be able to help as much as I can. So,
Well, there's a whole lot to unpack that you just gave me right there, Alex. We're going to definitely come back to the podcast and coaching because if you've got something to plug, we're absolutely going to plug it. And I just want to hear about it. But let me give you part of the backstory as to why I was suddenly like, I need to do this episode. I started in student housing way back in the day. And I was thinking about the team that was at Francisco Torres back at UC Santa Barbara. And I tell everybody that my first job was a resident assistant. And technically that was the first one I was hired for. But my first job I actually executed on was a junior maintenance technician. And the team there at Francisco Torres was what I like to call one of the most capable teams I have ever been a part of. The leader of it was a former Green Beret from the Vietnam era. One of the head technicians was one of the first graduates of the original Buds before there were SEALs. It's funny you say that you were going a submarine route. One of the guys was a submariner as well, which ironically, I've got a lot of those in life. My former next door neighbor was on a nuclear boat. My father-in-law was on a nuclear boat. So there's a lot of submariners in my life. But I was thinking about this crew. We even had a former Nicaraguan Contra on this crew. I was thinking about this crew and just how deep the military experience was with that crew. And for whatever reason, and it might just be my exposure, but that's why I kind of thought of this. I've been exposed within multifamily to less and less and less military service and veterans in the industry. And one of the questions I want to ask you is that something that is just my personal experience and trend in seeing that, or is that something that you kind of have also seen within the space? Is it
Yeah.
something that really is waning relative to what it was previously?
Yeah, I think it's waning. One, I think just the percentage of people who have served is waning. I mean, you're talking
A good
about,
point.
I know you're only 32 and student housing ages you, and the
Yeah,
it's like
add 20 years to that number and we got it right.
it's like we say in the military, it's like a 3-for-1 trade out. So if you've been in 6 years, you've aged like 18
18.
years. But so one, just that era you're talking about, there was just a lot more people who had served, and I think that
That's
those
a good point.
percentages are waning. But I mean, I think there's probably a problem in our industry. One, recruiting. Like, are we actually getting the message out there to veterans in terms of like the benefit of our industry? Why go into multifamily? Why go into housing in general? And so, are we doing a good job of educating and recruiting talent? I think that's if you think about even our industry, it's like as soon as we say what tangential industry should we attract talent from, everyone jumps straight to hospitality,
Yep.
as if that's like the thing that the only tangential industry that we should be able to pull talent from. Yet there's thousands and thousands of people exiting military service every year looking for the right industry. And these are people that we know operate well on a team. And like you said, I mean, our industry is one of a team. It's like any like superstar individual can be highlighted, but like the team, the on-site team specifically working together, front of house, back of house, leasing, maintenance, everything working together for the benefit of the resident. And I think it should make sense that we would look at veterans to join. I just don't think we do. We always jump straight to, well, if you've worked at a hotel, it's kind of like housing. It's like kind of not.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's part of it. And then I'll just say, and we're talking about this internally, some of our education requirements, and this really hurts coming from student housing because I want everyone to get a 4-year degree at very specific schools that have very specific apartments. And so, this is a very biased, point of view. But honestly, I think that we have a lot of positions in multifamily that really shouldn't require a 4-year degree. But by doing that, you really kind of create a bit of a barrier, especially for enlisted service members coming out who might not have had time to, use the benefits of the Montgomery GI Bill or go back to school or do some online education, even associate's degree. And so I think that if we were serious about attracting more veterans, we could really look at technical skill training and what we've done as opposed to requiring a 4-year degree for so many jobs in our industry. So
Well, you actually bring up a really good point. And actually, it's one of the things that I've always said I love about this industry is that this is one of the few industries out there that has actually multiple pathways for someone who doesn't have a 4-year degree to work their way into a 6-figure job and a 6-figure career. I love that about the industry. But you bring up a really good point about the college education, the 4-year degree, and I'll go to something my mother said years and years and years ago to me. And my mom is a PhD chemist. She taught for 35 years in higher education. And of course, she told me this after I got my degree, not while I was getting my degree. She goes, Andrew, you go to college to learn how to learn. Like that's why you go to college, is to learn how to learn. And from the exposure I've had from veterans who don't have necessarily 4-year degrees and come out, that's a lot of what the military can provide too, is that environment to learn how to learn a skill set and a job that you had no business going in doing before you got to the military.
yeah. Well, you learn how to learn. I think the military is more learn how to lead. And I think that more than ever, we need leaders at every level of an organization that understand how to operate on a team, how to take accountability, how to develop others. I mean, just think about if you're hiring someone 5 to 7 years out of the military. So you're talking about a 25-year-old. And so your options are 7 years of service as probably a non-commissioned officer that has command over, anywhere from 4 to 10 people, 12 people, whatever, or
Kind of
someone
like your
that
typical property.
has 4 years of education, which is great, but which one of those people as an organization do we feel like we could plug in and have, quicker success out of? And so I think that that's part of it. And in our industry, and you've seen this too, like almost a prerequisite of getting a job is having worked at a competitor. I'm like, why the hell did we all settle for that? It's like everyone always jokes what an incestuous business it is. It's like, yeah, we're creating that environment versus saying where can we bring in new talent. And I think more than ever with new ways that we operate with centralized services, with a lot of technology. I mean, one thing that you are trained in the military is like you got to be really flexible, really agile. As much as everyone thinks the military is very rigid, it's not. There's
Yeah,
always something new happening, a new scope you have to train on, a new SOP that they want to, roll out, some, change in everything. I mean, in fact, most military training is around what's the mission because everything else kind of goes to hell immediately anyway.
yeah,
And so there's these very agile, hardworking, kind of creative people in the military, and yet, they don't kind of see a path into our industry because if you say, "Hey, I'm 25 and I don't have a college degree," they're like, our industry's kind of set the tone that I guess you can be a junior tech or a porter or, some kind of option. Which again, those are great entryway
absolutely.
points, and those aren't like bad jobs, but if you're 27 years old and you're told, thanks for your service, now you have to start over. It's like, oh, it's the starting over, whether you're an officer, enlisted, whatever it is. Like, if you're a colonel and you get out of the military and then someone tells you, great, you could be a line level manager in this business. It's like, sweet. I just served 20 plus years. I'm young 40s and now I'm being told you can kind of start over. And I think that's just, if our industry could figure out how to make people feel like you're not starting over, you're kind of hitting your stride, I think we could attract a lot more veterans so that they know we're almost giving you credit for the years of service. Like, what were the skills you learned, and why not hire an ex-sergeant to be a community manager? If they're 25 years old but have 7 years of leadership experience, why are we telling those people, no, no, you have to start at the, back of the line, if you will? So
So without necessarily getting into secret sauce, although I don't think you would consider any of the secret sauce because I know you've got a bigger heart for the veteran community than that. How is Cardinal going about doing this? Like how are you reaching out to the veteran community? How are you educating your internal hiring process to these, I'm not going to call them nuances, but it's kind of a nuance of that military service
yeah,
background? Because I think a lot of us in the industry who are hiring for these different positions haven't really been trained on how to do a really good interview to find out these types of things. So we do hire the community manager that was across the street that's now looking for the slightly bigger community and operating. So what do you think we can bring to the multifamily community to kind of change this narrative?
yeah. I had reached out to one of the industry advocate groups. I won't say which one because I'm about to bash them. So one of one of the two. But I had a friend who, Darren at Williams at Portico, and
Well,
he had a kind of a similar like heart for how do we support more veterans, and we had gone to the group, the industry advocacy group, and said, "Hey, we'll take the lead. We just want the support, to be able to say this group has a kind of a pathway program for veterans." And we didn't get a lot of interest out of that offer, but I don't think it can be one. I think I have it easy because as a veteran, people look and say, "Oh, that's a veteran-led business," and
right.
so you don't have to like search through the hierarchy of the organization to say, does anyone here relate to veterans? I think, for me and I'm glad to set that example. Everyone at Cardinal knows I'm a veteran and I want to hire more veterans. So it's not like have to twist a lot of arms there. I think for the industry though, there needs to be one, a spotlight on other veteran leaders. It's not just me. I mean, I know veterans all over this industry, and we need to highlight them. We need to kind of show as an example how they were able to, be leaders in this industry, having come from a service background. And then I think we need kind of a certification course, if you will, to say, okay, what kind of NMHC or NAA or even Grace Hill or any of these companies? I mean, if someone wants to reach out to me and say I'll do it, that'd be great. But what are we doing to say here's kind of a bridge course that we can offer to say we're bridging the knowledge gap between what we would expect someone to have in the industry and what a transitioning veteran has, and that's not that much. I think we could do a good job to say, I remember when when I went to business school after the Marine Corps, I met someone and they're like, oh, I said, well, what did you do? And they're like, oh, I was in banking. And I was well, like you were a teller at a bank? And they're like, no, dumbass. Like I was in investment banking. I was like, okay, still no idea what you're
Yeah,
talking
exactly.
about. But I was like so embarrassed, and because I realized I was kind of an outsider, I didn't have the same experience. And I think that probably happens to some of the people we're recruiting when we say, well, do you have any experience in Yardi or Entrada? And they say, well, what's Yardi?
Yeah.
And then it's like, some recruiter just crosses them off the list. And it's like, well, hold on. Like, how do we bridge that gap so we can, it's really, we have to change the mindset of like, we we have to start with we want to hire all these people. Like they have a unique, invaluable skill set that we need. And then now it becomes our responsibility to say, well, what can we do to bring them up to speed? As opposed to right now, it seems like the starting point is, the veteran has to prove why 7 to 10 years of direct team leadership is valuable. It's like we know that's valuable. Like we know they have what we want, as opposed to them feeling like they need to prove it every time. And so I think if the industry had an education course that helped veterans kind of learn quicker, which they'll do the work, they'll kind of get the knowledge they need. But I think that would be very helpful. And again, this can't just be a Cardinal thing. I can
Yeah.
hire, if I hired, 5% more veterans, that's, an extra 30 a year. That's nothing compared to what the industry needs to do as a whole. So
let's go back to something you said in there that I want to get just a little bit more granular, and I want to give the listeners a concrete set of skills. You mentioned that they come out with the skills that we would be looking for. I think to a lot of folks who aren't exposed to people who have served or aren't exposed to veterans, that's a pretty nebulous statement.
yeah.
In your mind, what are those skill sets that the average veteran comes out of the military service with that could directly serve the multifamily space?
Yeah. Well, one, that's great. So I'll go through a few that just kind of come to mind. Trainable,
Oh,
very trainable. I mean, every position in the military has a very strict, regimented way of teaching and learning. And so they're very trainable. They follow standard operating procedures. And so for everyone out there who's frustrated that, you have all your SOP manuals and you have your rules and regulations, and then you go to your average site and it looks like, you're like, why isn't anyone following the SOPs? It's like veterans know how to follow SOPs. Like they're very
really good at it.
They're very trainable. I think they're comfortable with uncertainty, and so in a time of hyper change where there's a lot of things changing, there's a lot going on, I think that veterans generally have operated in that environment and so have some comfort, comfortable being uncomfortable, if you will, type of thinking. Usually pretty hardworking, usually um, very mission, and I would say like mission minded, and that could translate really to loyal.
Yeah.
These are people who, when they believe in a cause, are generally like all in on it. And so, if they get hired by your company and they believe in the culture, the mission, the core values, like these are people generally that are like, all right, I'm bought in, I'm all in here. This isn't just a job. Like think about, if you're in the military, you're not doing it for the pay. You're doing it because you believe you want to be part of something bigger. And so I think for businesses like Cardinal, like many of our competitors that I have a lot of respect for, Like if you can get them to buy into what your company is doing and the mission of your business, like these are people that aren't just looking for 18 months and then out the door they go. Like they want to be a part of a team and an organization. They can lead teams, they can delegate. Um, yeah, there's a long list, and generally, I think the one that probably gets maybe two that get overlooked, like
Please.
one, they're smart, like like this view that like for some reason, maybe because you didn't get a 4-year degree or whatever the movie's like, veterans are generally very smart, and two, very creative. Like this idea that you just kind of point at your collar and demand people to do what you do. It's like, no, like that's veterans are very used to coming up with creative solutions and creative leadership styles and creative ways to connect with the people they lead. And so I think the misconception is this like rigidity. And I'm like, I've very rarely worked with people in the military that were that rigid. They were
Well,
actually
it's
really creative people.
yeah, it's interesting you say that because when you started talking about SOPs and being mission minded, the three phrases that were going through my head at that point was, well, there's the mission, there's the strategy, and then there's the tactics. And my experience, and you just hit on it actually, was where the mission does not change. The mission is what the mission is. The strategy very rarely changes, but the tactics can change at any point in time. And I think that misconception you just brought up is what I've also seen, where people think that because you went through the military background and because you were in an environment that does expect, strict compliance, until the compliance doesn't work on a tactical level, you're not going to change the mission. But on a tactic, if you're supposed to breach a door, but you've got information that tells you there's charges on the other side of that door, you're not breaching the door, you're going around to the wall or something else. And I think that's
Yeah,
part of the creative mindset that you're kind of referring to in there, is that ability to see a problem, understand the problem has to be solved in order to achieve the mission, but we don't necessarily solve the problem the same way every time. We've got to react in the moment.
that's right.
Super, super interesting. Okay, so let's direct the conversation a little bit on some more direct ways that people can start thinking about how to reach out to the military community and make some of these changes. The hat that you're wearing is not lost on me. I've noted from the beginning. In fact, a post around about that hat. Well, post wasn't about the hat, but the hat was the focus of the post, and LinkedIn is what got me thinking about this too. You work with some specific organizations, and there's probably other similar organizations that folks could work with to kind of help facilitate this. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the hat and, more importantly, the organization behind it?
Yeah, so this is a Veterans Day hat that we do each year. I designed the first one and it was pretty lame. So now I have like people that have style and fashion design it. So I think we could only do one trucker hat. That was like the extent of my like hat game. So but yeah, so each year we sell these hats, and we have a partnership with Benson on the marketing side, and Brian's been a great supporter. And so he gives us the hats for free. We turn around and sell them to anyone who wants one, to raise money for Salute Colorado, which is an organization in Denver, in the Front Range and down in the Springs, that supports transitioning veterans. And so a lot of what you and I talked about today, specific to our industry, it's in all industries.
Yeah.
It's figuring out how to teach people. And I think that most people could relate to the concept of transferable skills, and I'll come back to that. But Salute Colorado is about mentorship. It's about community, and it's about knowledge and training. And so we do multiple programs to support hundreds of veterans each year. Some that are getting out of the service, some that got out and tried their hand in one or two jobs that didn't quite work the way they want to. And so for us, we're trying to build a playbook that we think other states could use to support their veteran community. And so, it kind of started with, what do we have? And it's like, we have business leaders with a lot of connections and clout and resources. And so how do we bring that together for the benefit of the veteran community? And so if you know Ted Brown at Lockton, who's a great
Yep.
leader and a great industry advocate, much like yourself, did not serve directly, but has served the community in unbelievable ways, including with time and treasure. But he brought me on, and he and I and others have kind of partnered to kind of continue to support this organization. And our hope is the work we do in Colorado can be, to use the word transferred, that could be transferred to other states where they could support their own veteran community. So
Interesting. So forgive me, I didn't know this. I didn't realize that you had kind of been part of the founding of that foundation and that it wasn't more common across the US. I'd kind of assumed there were multiples of these groups that we could start pointing people to across the US, but you're making it
yeah,
sound like it's a real opportunity
there
to
there
do it.
are a lot of great groups that help, and there's the big ones, that service veterans all over the U.S., and then there's kind of more regional. But yes, as you would expect, as soon as I joined, I'm like, all right, let's do some M&A. Let's roll up a few of these groups. Then we're going to take it national. We're going to be in 45 states. It's like, and I'm like, oh yeah, hold on. This is a business. This is nonprofit. So we don't, how do we have the biggest impact? But I will say that our mission there, or the tagline that we've really coalesced around, is no veteran underemployed. And I think there's this
I like
idea of
that.
like, it's not unemployed. It's like our job is not to get veterans jobs. Our job is to make sure that the veteran has the right opportunity set based on the skills that they bring. And so we really focus on the term underemployed because, a staff sergeant who's served 15 years and has all these accolades and skills and experiences, we don't want that service member, that veteran, to then just have to start over.
Yeah.
That is underemployed. That's not a fair employment opportunity for what that person brings. And so we've really focused on the term no veteran underemployed, not like we're a job placement agency who just says like, all right, you need a job, here's a job, we'll make a referral. It's more of giving that veteran the confidence to explore the right level of opportunity that he or she deserves. And that's what the program's all about.
That's super interesting, Alex, because I was actually, again, when I was getting ready for this podcast, I was thinking about the different veterans I'd worked with in different capacities over my career. And when I started in multifamily, not student, when I started in multifamily, my first building was literally on Coronado Island. So you can imagine how many special operators cross your path
Yeah.
when you're down there. And
That must have been rough on you being
it was terrible.
not a SEAL. I mean,
It was, well, I mean, and it was terrible living on Coronado Island with a new wife and no kids at that point. It was rough, really rough. But I was thinking about one of the managers that I had at one of the properties was a former naval officer, and I hadn't thought about it until you just said this. But in that capacity, he was absolutely underemployed. Like he quickly moved up and became a regional manager, and he's still in the industry and an executive in the industry. But I hadn't thought about that until you said that with his experience level, and I don't remember specifically which rank he ranked out at when he came out, but I mean, as a commissioned officer in the Navy, becoming a community manager at a 250 unit property is probably underemployed for him.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like he got his foot in the door and then was able to prove through, um, performance. That's another
Yeah.
thing. I mean, the entire military community is built around performance reviews, the fitness report and fit rep. So, in terms of the ability to take feedback and say, okay, I'm at this level now and I want to get to this level. And I'm sure he did this analysis of like, okay, I'm a
Yeah.
community manager. I should be a regional or higher. What's my kind of upward path? My whole point is just, why does he have to do that? Like, if we knew he should be higher up, that's where we should bring him into the organization. But anyway, I think for a lot of organizations that are about goal setting and doing, annual or biannual performance management reviews and saying, okay, you're here, this is what we've seen, this is what it will take to improve. I mean, everyone in the military community is wired that way. I mean, that's how
Yeah.
you go rank to rank. There's kind of the early days where we always joke, if you have a heartbeat, you're eligible for promotion. It's like, like you just, you're there. And maybe every industry has a few of those, but these are people who are built on, okay, if I get this education and this skill and I prove this competency or performance, I can move up. And so that's another great thing about veterans, especially as we work in an industry in which, doing performance management, it's hard, and a lot of people don't love it. They don't, they're not used to getting hard feedback on what they need to do to improve. And then you have this whole cohort of people who are very used to it and very comfortable in that environment.
Yeah, and I don't know why I feel the necessary to clarify this, but a fit rep is actually, I mean, yes, it has something to do with your physical fitness, but that is not what the fitness is
No,
talking about.
no.
Like, you have to be physically able to do the job, but that is not what we were talking about on that one. Okay, so I want to go back to just a couple things and we'll start to wrap this one up. You'd mentioned that you were working with someone doing a podcast and on leadership. What is that all about, and how can people get a hold of you and listen to you?
It's not out yet, but I do think that it's what we're trying to do. And this is Mike Targos, who was my XO, and a guy I served with named Jeff too, has had a great career, an executive career in medical sales. And what we're trying to do is bring executive level business experience together and turn it into kind of digestible material, so that really the same group of people, especially officers getting out of the military, some kind of material. It's not just direct coaching, but our ability to kind of relay um, messages back to that community. And then also, our peers and colleagues and other leaders who want to just learn how our military experience has shaped our professional careers. And so we're working through the marketing of it. As you can imagine, three Marines. I don't know if marketing's our best skill, but
Just ship, Alex. Just ship. Start recording. Start putting it out there. You can market it later.
there you go. So that's what we're doing now. We're just getting content. It's been a lot of fun just to kind of get on camera and talk through issues, everything ranging from leadership and culture and um, you know change management and all kinds of fun topics and we're trying to take basically how does a Marine and a military leader, like, how do you think about it compared to kind of what we see more common in the business world? So really excited. The working name's Retreat Hell, which all of us served in the Marine Corps in 2nd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, and our slogan, our saying was "Retreat Hell," which was a throwback to a World War II quote. And so I'll let you know once we actually have something worth listening to. But thank you for
Please.
the chance to plug it a little bit. So
Yeah, definitely let me know, and we can always update show notes so we can put the link to it in the show notes. And I always love throwing that out there because that's the one part of this tech that I don't do myself. So I'm sure someone else will be able to put it in the show notes. Wrapping up, I adopted a question last season that I asked everybody that I'm going to continue to ask this season as well, because I think it's still relevant. And it's kind of funny. I was thinking back on previous conversations you and I have had, and one of them when I had a different life and was somewhere else, I asked, what do you think about the idea of, survive till 25? And you actually immediately retorted back to me and says, I'm not going to survive. I'm going to thrive through 25. So I guess my first question is going to be, because that was about a year ago now, how did that go for you? Did you feel like you're actually thriving? And then if you can finish off the second part of it is, as you look over the course of, call it, the next 3-ish years, what's the area of the business that excites you the most? Where do you think there's that next big opportunity within housing? And I'll let you define opportunity any way you want.
Well, yeah, this year on a personal level, thriving, refocus on physical health, mental health, how I'm spending my time. So that was a good use of time this year. I think as a
Good.
business, um, you gotta thrive in the hard times. This is what I always say, even about culture. It's like culture in the easy times isn't like,
Yeah.
of course you're happy when things are going well. It's what about in the hard times? Is your culture going to be real? Are you going to actually do the things that matter even when they're hard? And so I think that's been kind of 2024. It's like, what opportunities exist because of the hard times.
Right.
We launched an in-house development business, which I think, again, the capital markets were very slow this year, way less transaction volume, way harder to get deals approved and financed. So it was a good time for us to say, well, let's kind of have a catch-up lap here. There's a pace car out keeping everyone else at pace. Let's kind of take a lap here. I think that there was a lot of consolidation in the industry, which some of that led to talent being available.
Yep.
Some led to just fewer enemies to fight, which is always nice. Yeah, when you have 50 competitors, you got to keep eyes on all of them. It's like, that's fine. Let everyone get together, and then we can just keep track of 3 or 4 of them. But yeah, I think this was a great year for us. Knock on wood, we may be the only real estate company to ever win Glassdoor's best place to work twice, but as Aaron Rodgers once said, so we'll see when the awards come out, but we're hoping that even during hard times, our team members continue to say, this is a great place to work. This is a place that cares about me. This is a place that invests. And again, these are during hard times, restructuring, and you got to, sometimes you're laying people off or jobs aren't going the way. Like, this is all business. And so we've always just said, it's not what we do, it's how we do it. We're going to stay true to our culture, our mission, our core values, even in hard times. And I think 2024 was a pretty hard year. And so we certainly don't feel like we survived by the skin of our teeth. We feel like we were thriving.
Good.
It was actually our biggest growth year ever.
Wow.
We added more multifamily units than we've ever added, and more student beds, which is pretty remarkable since we've been the fastest growing student company for many years. So to add another, nearly 25,000, maybe more beds, I think was pretty remarkable. So while others were maybe sitting around saying, woe is me, we were out there kicking ass, and which felt really good. So what excites me most the next 3 years, like, it just has to be the intersection of housing, resident experience, and technology. And that's probably true in all parts of our life in terms of what I would say is the next big, great revolution, and that's going to be the AI revolution. So you have
Sure.
industrial, internet. I mean, maybe we're all wrong, but it seems like the next 3 years are going to reshape how we work, what each job does, how technology interacts with our residents. I mean, it's just, my guess is when you look at the studies by Deloitte and others, where they said like 80% of jobs will be, completely, impacted and completely kind of rewritten in terms of roles and responsibilities. It's like, well, here we go. And
Yeah.
so it feels like scary and exciting. And I said this about centralization when you and I talked before, but you know, you to use a military term, like, we're not going to entrench. Like, we're not going to play defense and entrench. Like, we have wood, and instead of building a fortress, we're going to build a boat, and we're going to ride with the wave. We're going to be bold. We're going to go adventure. And so I think what excites me most is the unknown. Like, this is
Oh,
going to
that's a
be a
great answer.
really fun adventure, and we're jumping on the boat, and we're going into some foggy kind of like, all right, here we go. And we're going to stick together as a team. We're going to stay true to our mission. We're going to take care of our people, but it's going to be an exciting couple years of discovery and change. And I'm actually really excited and hopeful that as things change, our industry will be better for the people who work in it and the residents we serve. Like, that should
Amen.
be our goal. Like, the industry will be better, our people's jobs will be better, our residents will be better. Like, let's go on that adventure. That sounds pretty exciting. So
I love that. Sign me up, and I love the fact that you're the most excited about the unknown, because I think that that's a great way to frame the future of what I'm with you. I think there's going to be massive change to the operating model over the next 3 to 5 years. And I think largely driven by what you said, largely by AI, but also largely in the fact of, like, our residents want to be served differently than they did 30,
exactly.
40 years ago.
Amen.
So anyway, I can go, that's a whole nother podcast we can go down on that one. But Alex, why don't you give everybody where they can offer their support for the foundation and anything else you want to plug, and then I'll just thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you. It's great being here. If those that want to support, you could just go to salutecolorado.com. You can also just Google it, and or you can email me at alex@cardinalgroup.com. Actually, a quick just like story. I was on a podcast, and a gentleman that works at Blue Vista, which is actually kind of a competitor of ours, reached out, and he lives in Chicago, has no direct tie to the military community, and said, I'd love to mentor one of your fellows. I mean, how awesome is
Wow.
that? And this is an executive in our industry. And since then, he's given his time just helping veterans in Colorado, not Chicago, but just reached across the aisle and said, I'd love to help. And so that's just, I hope that there's another moment like that where someone hearing this reaches out, email me and says, I just love to mentor. I'd love to help. Time's way more important than money, because we can always raise money, but we need leaders willing to just give their time to talk with, to mentor, to coach these transitioning veterans. So
Awesome. I can't think of a better way to end this. Alex, appreciate you so much. We'll talk soon.
thanks, buddy.